In a world overflowing with information, critical thinking seems to be vanishing. Social media, echo chambers, and viral outrage amplify opinions over reason, while groupthink silences nuance. Why are intelligent people falling prey to collective mistakes? Are we witnessing the rise of collective stupidity? In this video, we'll explore the psychological, cultural, and technological forces undermining independent thought. From cognitive biases to the power of conformity, we'll uncover why questioning, analyzing, and thinking for yourself has become a rare skill, and why reclaiming it is more urgent than ever. In the digital age, one would assume that access to information would make humans more intelligent, more discerning, and more capable of independent thought. Yet, paradoxically, critical thinking appears to be eroding at an alarming rate. Increasingly, societies are witnessing what some scholars call the rise of collective stupidity, a phenomenon where groups of people, often intelligent individuals, adopt flawed reasoning, fall prey to misinformation, or make decisions that defy logic. But what is causing this decline in critical thinking? And why are so many succumbing to the allure of groupthink and surface-level understanding? To answer this, we need to explore the psychological, social, and technological factors that are reshaping the way we think, and often, the way we fail to think. The erosion of independent thought. Critical thinking is the ability to analyze, evaluate, and synthesize information before forming a judgment. It involves questioning assumptions, examining evidence, and considering alternative perspectives. Historically, education systems, philosophy, and intellectual culture have placed high value on these skills. Yet today, independent thought is under siege. One of the most significant drivers is the proliferation of information and the speed at which it spreads. Social media platforms, 24-hour news cycles, and online communities bombard us with a constant stream of headlines, opinions, and facts. The result is cognitive overload. Our brains struggle to filter, evaluate, and prioritize information, often relying on heuristics, mental shortcuts that can lead to biased or incorrect conclusions. Furthermore, the digital landscape rewards speed and virality over reflection and depth. An emotionally charged post, a sensational claim, or a catchy meme spreads faster than a nuanced article grounded in evidence. Consequently, people are conditioned to react instinctively rather than analyze critically, reinforcing superficial thinking. The psychology of collective stupidity. At the heart of this issue lies human psychology. Cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking, play a pivotal role. Confirmation bias, for instance, leads people to favor information that aligns with their pre-existing beliefs, while dismissing contradictory evidence. Similarly, the Dunning-Kruger effect causes individuals with limited knowledge in a domain to overestimate their understanding, often confidently asserting falsehoods. These biases are not inherently dangerous. They evolved as shortcuts for decision-making. However, in modern society, where information is abundant and complex, they can amplify errors in judgment. Another key factor is social conformity. Solomon Asch's classic experiments in the 1950s demonstrated that individuals often conform to the majority opinion even when it is clearly wrong. In today's hyper-connected world, this tendency is magnified. Online communities and social networks create echo chambers where dissenting views are minimized and agreement, often shallow or performative, is rewarded. Liking, sharing, and commenting become social currencies, and deviating from group norms can result in ostracism with information. Critical thinking dynamic fosters herd behavior, social media critical thinking, and viral outrage amplify opinions over reason. The role of education and intellectual complacency are intelligent people another contributing factor to the decline of critical thinking. Are we witnessing the rise of modern education systems? In this
Traditional
video,
education
we'll explore
often
the
psychological,
memorization
and
standardized
technological
testing
forces
and the
undermining
regurgitation of
independent
facts,
thought,
rather
from
than fostering
cognitive biases
analytical
to the
reasoning
power
and
of
independent
conformity.
thought. We'll
Students
uncover
may
why
become
questioning,
adept at
analyzing
recalling information
and thinking for
but
yourself
not
has
at
become a
evaluating
rare
it
skill,
critically.
and why
While
reclaiming
education
it
has
is more
evolved in
urgent
many
than ever.
places
To include problem-solving and inquiry-based learning, the pace of technological change often outstrips educational reform, leaving a gap in critical thinking skills. Intellectual complacency also plays a role. With information so readily available, there is less incentive to engage deeply with complex ideas. Search engines provide instant answers, and AI tools can summarize arguments in seconds. While these conveniences are remarkable, they can inadvertently promote passive consumption rather than active reasoning. People may feel they know enough without ever grappling with the nuances or evaluating the validity of the information they encounter. The influence of media and technology. Media consumption, particularly through digital platforms, has dramatically reshaped thought patterns. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement, often pushing sensationalist or emotionally charged content over sober analysis. Clickbait headlines, viral videos, and curated feeds encourage rapid reactions rather than reflective thinking. The result is a culture of impulsive judgments, where individuals adopt opinions without critical scrutiny. Moreover, the rise of deepfakes, AI-generated content, and misinformation campaigns has made it increasingly difficult to distinguish truth from fiction. In such an environment, skepticism becomes crucial, but many either fail to apply it or mistake cynicism for wisdom. Collective stupidity emerges when entire communities accept or propagate false narratives, sometimes even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The psychology of virality compounds the problem. Humans are wired to pay attention to threats, outrage, and emotionally resonant stories. Platforms exploit this, amplifying content that triggers strong emotional reactions. Reasoned argument, statistical evidence, and nuanced discussion rarely go viral. Over time, this conditions users to favor intuition and emotion over logic, undermining critical thinking on a massive scale. Social and cultural pressures. Beyond psychology and technology, social and cultural dynamics exacerbate the decline in independent thought. Modern societies often reward conformity, consensus, and loyalty to group identity. People may adopt beliefs and behaviors to fit in, gain approval, or avoid conflict, even when these beliefs are irrational. Political polarization, ideological rigidity, and identity-driven debates create environments where questioning one's own assumptions is discouraged. Critical thinking can feel risky. To think independently is to invite criticism, social isolation, or online harassment. Additionally, the cultural elevation of expertise by affiliation over expertise by knowledge contributes to collective stupidity. People often trust opinions based on social status, celebrity influence, or popularity rather than evidence or logic. This phenomenon, sometimes called the appeal to authority fallacy, allows misinformation to spread, particularly when influential figures endorse it. Real-world consequences. The consequences of declining critical thinking are profound. At an individual level, it can lead to poor decision-making, susceptibility to scams, and flawed reasoning in personal and professional contexts. At a societal level, it can erode democratic processes, amplify social division, and empower populism based on emotion rather than evidence. History provides stark examples. Propaganda, mass hysteria, and moral panics often exploit the failure of collective reasoning. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted these dangers. Misinformation about treatments, vaccines, and public health measures spread rapidly, often outpacing accurate information. Communities divided along lines of belief, with collective actions frequently undermined by misinformation and fear. This episode underscores how the decline of critical thinking is not a theoretical concern. It has tangible, life-altering consequences. Reclaiming critical thinking. Despite these challenges, the decline of critical thinking is not irreversible. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing cognitive biases, understanding social pressures, and acknowledging the influence of technology can empower individuals to think more deliberately. Education plays a critical role, emphasizing reasoning, skepticism, and evidence evaluation over rote memorization. Encouraging inquiry, debate, and reflection fosters intellectual resilience. Technology itself can also be harnessed to restore critical thinking. Fact-checking tools, digital literacy programs, and platforms that reward reasoned discourse over click-driven engagement can counteract the forces of collective stupidity. Individuals can cultivate habits of reflection, pausing before sharing information, seeking diverse perspectives, questioning sources, and engaging with ideas contrary to their beliefs. On a cultural level, societies must value depth over speed, reason over outrage, and skepticism over blind acceptance. Public discourse that rewards careful argumentation, critical inquiry, and intellectual humility can reshape norms and make independent thought desirable once again. While social pressure and technological incentives currently push toward conformity and superficial thinking, collective action and cultural shifts can reverse this trend. The paradox of knowledge abundance. Ironically, the very abundance of knowledge that should empower critical thinking contributes to its decline. We live in an age where anyone can access vast libraries of information instantly. Yet, without the skills to evaluate, interpret, and synthesize that information, the result is confusion, overconfidence, and superficial understanding. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Critical thinking requires reflection, context, and discernment. The rise of collective stupidity is therefore not a failure of intelligence, but a failure of process. People are not inherently irrational. They are responding rationally to incentives, social cues, and cognitive limitations. Understanding these dynamics allows for targeted interventions, from education and media literacy to cultural reform and personal habits of reflection. The imperative to think critically. The 21st century presents humanity with unprecedented challenges and opportunities. Our capacity to access knowledge is unmatched in human history, and yet, paradoxically, critical thinking, the very skill that allows us to navigate complexity, appears to be eroding. The decline of independent thought and the corresponding rise of collective stupidity are urgent crises, affecting not just individual decision-making, but the functioning of societies, economies, and democracies worldwide. Critical thinking is no longer merely a desirable intellectual skill. It is an imperative, a survival tool in a world flooded with information, misinformation, and emotional manipulation. Understanding why critical thinking is under threat and how to reclaim it requires an exploration of the psychological, technological, social, and cultural forces that shape human cognition. Psychological biases, the invisible hand shaping thought. Human beings are not purely rational creatures. Our minds are shaped by cognitive biases, systematic patterns of deviation from rationality. These biases are mental shortcuts that evolved to help our ancestors make quick decisions under uncertainty. Today, however, these same shortcuts often lead to errors in reasoning, poor judgment, and susceptibility to persuasion. One of the most pervasive biases is confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms pre-existing beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. In an era of social media and algorithmic feeds, confirmation bias is magnified. People often find themselves in digital echo chambers, exposed primarily to information that reinforces their worldview, making it harder to question assumptions or consider alternative perspectives. Equally significant is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which describes the phenomenon where individuals with limited knowledge overestimate their competence. This effect contributes to the rise of collective stupidity because confident assertions, even when baseless, are often perceived as authoritative. Coupled with availability bias, where dramatic or emotionally charged information is weighted more heavily than statistical realities, these cognitive tendencies distort our perception of reality. Biases are not inherently pathological. They are adaptive in certain contexts. However, in complex societies with rapidly changing technology and constant information influx, these same biases can undermine judgment, making critical thinking both more necessary and more difficult. Social conformity and the pressure to belong. Beyond individual psychology, social dynamics significantly influence critical thinking. Humans are inherently social creatures, wired to conform to group norms. From a survival perspective, conformity historically offered safety, cohesion, and stability. Yet in modern societies, this tendency can suppress independent thought, especially when social approval is tied to agreement with popular opinions. Solomon Asch's famous experiment in the 1950s revealed that individuals frequently conform to a group consensus, even when it is objectively incorrect. In today's interconnected world, conformity is amplified by digital platforms. Online communities and social networks function as modern echo chambers where agreement is rewarded with likes, shares, and affirmation, while dissent risks backlash, ridicule, or ostracism. This creates an environment where surface-level conformity often overrides careful reasoning. Social conformity also interacts with identity. Many people align their beliefs with the groups they identify with, whether political, cultural, or ideological, because deviation threatens social bonds. The result is polarization and groupthink, where entire communities adopt flawed reasoning collectively, often dismissing evidence or logic that contradicts their shared narrative. Technological amplification of emotion. Technology, particularly social media and digital news, exerts a powerful influence on cognition. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement prioritize emotionally charged content, sensationalism, and virality. Reasoned argument, nuance, and subtlety rarely receive the attention or reward these platforms provide. This amplification of emotion encourages rapid, reactive thinking rather than reflective, deliberate reasoning. The human brain is wired to respond to threats, outrage, and dramatic narratives, making emotionally charged content more salient and memorable. While this may have evolutionary advantages in survival scenarios, it creates a fertile ground for misinformation, rumor, and group hysteria in modern digital contexts. The ease with which misinformation spreads is another critical challenge. Deepfakes, AI-generated content, and viral conspiracy theories blur the line between truth and falsehood. Without robust critical thinking skills, individuals are vulnerable to manipulation. The danger is compounded when emotionally persuasive falsehoods resonate with existing biases, reinforcing preconceptions and further entrenching collective mistakes. Cultural pressures and intellectual complacency. Cultural norms and values also shape our capacity to think critically. In many societies, intellectual conformity is subtly encouraged. Challenging authority, questioning consensus, or thinking differently can be socially costly. This cultural pressure discourages independent thought and reinforces groupthink. Additionally, the abundance of information available today has paradoxically fostered intellectual complacency. With instant access to answers via search engines, AI tools, and knowledge repositories, there is less incentive to deeply engage with ideas. People may feel that knowing a few surface-level facts suffices, leading to superficial understanding and overconfidence in one's knowledge. Critical thinking, by contrast, requires effort, reflection, and a willingness to question assumptions, habits that are often neglected in favor of convenience. Education, the double-edged sword. Education has historically been the primary mechanism for cultivating critical thinking. In theory, schools, universities, and intellectual traditions train individuals to question, analyze, and synthesize information. In practice, however, modern education often emphasizes rote memorization, standardized testing, and the regurgitation of facts rather than fostering genuine reasoning skills. While inquiry-based learning, debate, and problem-solving exercises are increasingly incorporated, educational systems struggle to keep pace with technological, social, and cultural shifts that challenge critical thinking. Moreover, the quality and accessibility of education vary widely, creating disparities in reasoning abilities across populations. Without deliberate instruction in critical thinking and epistemic humility, the recognition of one's cognitive limitations, students are ill-prepared to navigate a world saturated with conflicting information and persuasive misinformation. The consequences of declining critical thinking. The erosion of critical thinking has profound consequences for both individuals and societies. On an individual level, a lack of analytical skills can result in poor decision-making, susceptibility to scams, and vulnerability to ideological manipulation. People may adopt beliefs and behaviors that are illogical, harmful, or misinformed, often without recognizing the errors in their reasoning. At a societal level, the stakes are even higher. Declining critical thinking undermines democratic processes, weakens public discourse, and enables the spread of populism, conspiracy theories, and misinformation. The COVID-19 pandemic exemplified these dynamics. Misinformation about treatments, vaccines, and public health measures spread widely, often outpacing scientifically grounded information. Collective behavior, shaped by emotional reaction rather than reason, had tangible consequences for public health, social cohesion, and trust in institutions. History provides further warnings. From moral panics to propaganda-fueled conflicts, the failure of collective reasoning has repeatedly led to social upheaval, injustice, and human suffering. The rise of collective stupidity is not an abstract threat. It is a concrete force with real-world impacts. Reclaiming the art of reasoning. Despite these challenges, critical thinking can be nurtured and restored. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing cognitive biases, understanding social pressures, and acknowledging the influence of technology equips individuals to resist the forces undermining independent thought. Education plays a pivotal role in cultivating reasoning skills. Instruction that emphasizes analysis, evaluation, skepticism, and evidence-based reasoning fosters intellectual resilience. Encouraging students to question assumptions, engage with diverse perspectives, and evaluate sources critically prepares them to navigate complexity. Technology itself can be harnessed as an ally rather than a threat. Fact-checking tools, digital literacy programs, and platforms that incentivize thoughtful discourse can counteract the spread of misinformation. Individuals can adopt deliberate habits, pausing before sharing information, seeking multiple sources, engaging with opposing viewpoints, and reflecting on the reliability of evidence. Personal practices for critical thinking. Critical thinking is both a skill and a habit. Developing it requires intentional practice. Some strategies include: question assumptions. Don't take information at face value. Ask why a claim is made and what evidence supports it. Seek diverse perspectives. Engage with viewpoints that challenge your beliefs. This helps counteract confirmation bias and broadens understanding. Reflect before reacting. Pause to analyze emotionally charged information before forming judgments. Evaluate sources. Consider credibility, expertise, and potential bias in information sources. Embrace intellectual humility. Recognize the limits of your knowledge and remain open to revision in light of new evidence. By incorporating these practices into daily life, individuals can strengthen their capacity for reasoned judgment, resist manipulation, and model critical thinking for others. Cultural and societal imperatives. Beyond individual effort, societies must create environments that value critical thinking. Public discourse should reward careful argumentation, evidence-based reasoning, and intellectual humility. Social norms should encourage questioning, debate, and reflection rather than conformity and performative agreement. Media platforms, educational institutions, and governments all play roles in shaping these norms. Policies that promote media literacy, transparency, and accountability can help curb the influence of misinformation. Cultural messaging that celebrates curiosity, skepticism, and reason over speed, sensation, or popularity fosters collective resilience against cognitive and social pitfalls. The paradox of knowledge abundance. One of the great paradoxes of the modern era is that access to vast amounts of information does not automatically translate into better thinking. Knowledge without critical analysis is insufficient. It can create overconfidence, superficial understanding, and the illusion of expertise. Critical thinking requires discernment, reflection, and synthesis. It is a process, not a product. The challenge is not simply to acquire more information, but to develop the intellectual tools to navigate complexity, evaluate evidence, and resist emotional or social pressures. In this sense, the rise of collective stupidity is less a failure of intelligence than a failure of process. Why critical thinking matters now more than ever. In an age of rapid technological, social, and political change, critical thinking is essential for individual and collective survival. It enables people to make informed choices, engage constructively in civic life, and resist manipulation. It allows societies to adapt to complexity, innovate responsibly, and maintain cohesion in the face of diverse perspectives. The path forward. The imperative to think critically is both urgent and achievable. Psychological biases, social pressures, technological influences, and cultural norms all challenge our capacity for independent thought, yet they are not insurmountable. Awareness, education, deliberate practice, and societal reform can restore the art of reasoning. Critical thinking is a personal skill, a civic responsibility, and a cultural necessity. It empowers individuals to navigate complexity, resist manipulation, and make sound judgments. It enables societies to confront challenges, adapt intelligently, and foster justice and innovation. The path forward requires vigilance, courage, and commitment, the willingness to pause, reflect, question, and think for oneself. In a world increasingly dominated by speed, emotion, and conformity, reclaiming critical thinking is not merely an intellectual pursuit. It is an imperative for survival, progress, and human flourishing. Critical thinking isn't disappearing because people are dumb. It's fading because our environment rewards speed, conformity, and clicks over reflection. But awareness is the first step toward change. By questioning sources, challenging assumptions, and thinking independently, we can resist the tide of collective stupidity. It starts with small, deliberate choices, pausing before sharing, seeking diverse perspectives, and valuing reason over outrage. If we commit to these practices, critical thinking can survive and even thrive in the digital age. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and don't let the crowd decide for you. The power of thought is in your hands.